Brandon! A brand new The Legend of Zelda game exists, even though the last one was only a year ago. And not only have we both played it, but we've done absolutely everything you can do. Some would say that we 100%'ed this game. And, Brandon Miracle, I want to know if you had a good time doing that.
I had one of the most pleasant times I've had playing a video game since the last time a Zelda game came out. It's excellent. An excellent game.
I am going to echo that opinion.
Oh, there he did it.
No, this is such an interesting game, because the last 2D Zelda, if we want to count Triforce Heroes, which I think we should, just for prosperity's sake, but the last actual traditional 2D Zelda was A Link Between Worlds, and that game owes a lot of its core to Link to the Past. So the last fully brand new Zelda that had everything all to its own was Spirit Tracks. So we're talking a long time ago since the last top-down Zelda. And I was a little bit hesitant that Echoes of Wisdom was going to be a repeat of A Link Between Worlds, which isn't a bad thing, great game. But I was scared when that overview shot showed a very similar A Link to the Past Hyrule. But now that I've played it, it is so similar to like discovering Lon Lon Ranch in Breath of the Wild. That's the parallel I'm kind of drawing here. Because yeah, there are landmarks for Link to the Past, but for the most part, this feels entirely like its own world. And really, it's its own thing. There's so few actual callbacks to A Link to the Past when it comes down to just the general world design.
Yeah, if you remember Link to the Past's map, generally speaking, the things that the landmarks that you expect are where they should be, but they're not like done in a way that's kind of like in your face. It's almost like this is where that thing should generally be, but we're not going to fully commit to that having to be the case. And there are also cases too where, the desert is where the desert is in Link to the Past.
Right, but they're not similar at all, though.
Yeah, like you can even see the old dungeon from Link to the Past, right where it's supposed to be. But the map continues past the barriers of Link to the Past. It just continues and keeps going, and it makes this somewhat familiar Hyrule, like you said, feel completely fresh and brand new.
I want to bounce off the word barriers, because this game doesn't have any barriers. It is so refreshing to be in a top-down game and just being able to not only jump, but jump on whatever you want to jump on and just walk over the environment. Like, all our lives, we've been conditioned to think that there are barriers to every screen. We shouldn't be jumping on the background, we shouldn't be trying to find other ways in. But this game just says no to all of that. You can make whatever staircase you want and climb on the trees, climb up the mountains. It's incredibly refreshing for 100% playthrough. Because in previous Zelda games, there's always that sort of linear path to get through an area, whether it's a cave or just a mountain or something. But this time, you can just forge your own path. There's no need to revisit the same area each time. You can just go in different ways, come from different directions. It is just so nice to move around in this Hyrule.
It's the most freeing a 2D Zelda has ever felt.
Absolutely.
And the most freeing a 2D Zelda has felt since Link to the Past. Because even Link Between Worlds, which tried to be more freeing in terms of the order that you take dungeons on that world felt very restrictive. As to where Link to the Past just kind of lets you traverse the map. Even if you can't do anything where you can go, you can get to a lot of the places in Link to the Past right from the beginning.
Yeah.
There's only rocks blocking your way in a few places, but for the most part, that whole map is accessible to you. And yeah, Echoes of Wisdom is the same way, but to an even further extent. There's nothing stopping you going to basically anywhere you want to.
No.
And there's something magical about that.
Yeah, it's definitely that sort of Breath of the Wildification of 2D Zelda. But this game is actually quite traditional in most other regards. It's still fairly linear to an extent. It's got traditional dungeons. It's got just normal progression. It is open-ended, but it's kind of like the way most top-down Zeldas are, where they give you small chunks of open-endedness. But it's not like you're doing everything at once. You actually have to make your way through the game in a fairly traditional way. But not only does it give you the improvisation of all those echoes, kind of similar to what Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom do, but it just breaks those restraints, and it's all the better for it. I will say, though, and I don't know if you share this opinion or not, but I think the game gets a lot better after the first 2 dungeons. So the first 2 are the Gerudo one and the Jabal Waters one. I think those quests, the lead up to those dungeons, there's a lot of just find this NPC, talk to them here, talk to them there, talk to them here. Like in the Zora one, you're going from the River Zora village to the Sea Zora village, and you're just going back and forth talking to people. I found that a little bit repetitive and very wordy, but then from every dungeon after that, there's a lot more involved. There's more that you actually have to do yourself. There's more caves to go through and everything like that. So I definitely think it started a little weak, but then became something far grander.
Yeah, I think I agree. Link Between Worlds also has a similar moment where after that first set of dungeons, the game just kind of unlocks the door for you, and the rest of the game is open. I felt like Echoes of Wisdom did a very similar thing, because even the overworld music changes.
Yes, I love that.
It feels like that moment in the game, and I assume this is a spoiler cast, so we can talk about stuff like this.
Let's ease ourselves into that stuff. So we'll talk about the specific spoiler stuff as we go on. But yeah, let's just general game for now.
So you do your first 3 dungeons, and then the game basically lets you loose. I mean, you're already let loose before that, but you're let loose to an even greater extent, because now every major dungeon is available to you. So no matter where you go, you can progress the game. Mm-hmm. And I felt that to be a great turning point, because I was feeling a little uncertain doing those first 2 dungeons, especially the Zora section, like you said, because it was just a lot of going back and forth between the NPCs, not really doing anything yourself.
Yeah.
It was not exactly interactive.
No, it's a cute little story. It's nice to see River Zoras and Sea Zoras interacting, but yeah, you're not doing a thing.
Yeah, and then in the Gerudo section, there's a little bit more going on there, but and that's where I went first in my playthrough, actually. But we discussed this in our chat yesterday.
Yeah, we did.
If you go to some of those areas before progressing the plot, like there's a cave where you have to light some torches by a coffin. If you do that before being prompted to by the story, the puzzle will not solve. Nothing will happen.
Right.
And that's a bit disappointing.
We all had that issue. Like we were saying in our Discord, it was me, you, Daniel, and Ash all echoed the exact same thing. And it's just a regular cave. It's very similar to what you would expect like a heart container to be, or a crystal. And so I went through that area thinking I was going to get a heart container at the end, and then you were just left with on the other side of a rift with those 2 candles. And you're thinking, okay, so what else do I do to solve this puzzle? And the answer is nothing. You got to go back and progress the story. And that wasn't the only instance of that happening for me. I remember going through the Deku Scrub Forest, and I got to the southwestern corner, southeastern corner even, and I found the key NPC for the story quest there, but they weren't ready for me because I hadn't talked to the ones in town first, and that happens a little bit. It probably can happen in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom too, but because this world is much smaller, more condensed, you can traverse it faster and easier, you're just more likely to walk into these roadblocks. And it's a shame that they're there, but on the other hand, it's also very easy just to get back into town because the game is so easy to travel around.
This ended up happening to me also in Goron City.
Oh, okay.
On Elden Volcano. I went to the caves you end up having to go to before even going to Goron City. And I was able to get the Rock Roast Echo, but there was nothing in there and I couldn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
And then the Lizalfos cave, they didn't even let me go inside. There was a Goron blocking the door saying, nope, you can't come in here.
Ah. Yeah, I kind of wish the Gerudo one had that now, because I was stumped for a long time thinking, like, what do you do here? But it is a shame that a game's so open-ended has to sort of resort to that. But I wish they tidied that up a bit. But otherwise, it's just a joy to play this game. It's so fun to explore, find little caves, lift up rocks and find little crystals, which would usually be Koroks, I suppose. But yeah, I more than any other Zelda, probably, it's just fun to 100% this game. And you said to me, you finished it on the third day, I'm pretty sure, of its release. And you were saying that you picked up most of the collectibles just along the way. And that's the kind of game this is. It's so fun just to, while you're exploring, just to get distracted by something and try and get a heart piece. Like, usually with Zeldas, because they're usually rather contained, it's rare that I will come close to finding all the collectibles and have to go around and repeat areas, but that was not the case with this one, because likewise I found a lot of stuff on the journey just because I wanted to experiment with my echoes and find all the heart pieces, and it was just so much fun to do that.
Yeah, by the time I had rolled credits, I was only missing 2 heart pieces, so half of a heart container. I explored every possible inch of that world because it was just a joy. Going around experiencing a new 2D Zelda with as much freedom as the game gives you, it was very addictive. It definitely captures that feeling I got playing Breath of the Wild for the first time, where I just want to see what's there. Like, the idea of exploring is the part that's exciting. And that's a magical thing in a 2D Zelda game. It's, like you said, it's a lot more condensed, so it's not as overwhelming. You know, you'll get distracted from doing the main quest, which clearly we all did based on our conversations. But it's never enough to keep you away for too long. It strikes a really, really nice balance, I think.
It is very hard to put this game down. Like with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, you'll see something off in the distance, like a weird-looking tree or a mountain you want to climb or something like that. In Echoes of Wisdom, there's just stuff everywhere. Like its entire runtime is just full of stuff. There's never really any downtime in this game. It's so condensed. There's villages you can see, there's mountains you can climb, there's battles you can do, there's echoes you can find. Like, there's just everything is just constantly whirling away, and it gives you this loop of immediacy, which Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom give you in like a very short burn, but this one's just thrown at you repeatedly. And it is much shorter than Tears of the Kingdom Breath of the Wild, but it's just a nice change of pace. And I wasn't sure like where Zelda was going to go after Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, because most games don't go smaller in scope. They get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's so nice that we can have both types of Zelda, like the big, like generation-defining one, and also the smaller, compact, lovable little thing that this is.
Yeah, I'm glad that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom do not exist at the expense of a more traditional, lower-scope Zelda game like Echoes of Wisdom. They can coexist, and they should coexist.
Absolutely.
I remember I watched Rebecca Stone's reaction to Echoes of Wisdom being revealed, and something that she said really, really caught me off guard. She said that she never thought we were going to get a new 2D Zelda game again.
Whoa.
And that kind of struck a chord with me. I did not realize that. I mean, obviously, yeah, it's been a very long time. It just did not really click with me until that moment that was true. So I'm glad Nintendo has committed itself to having multiple series of Zelda running simultaneously, and for giving the keys to the castle to Grezzo, because they have more than earned it.
Grezzo should be out of remake prison forever. They do great remakes, but I don't want to see them do any more. They need the keys to 2D Zelda, making original entries alongside the 3D ones all the time. Or another shot at Ever Oasis, whatever comes first, but I want to see them just keep doing original stuff, because they are so talented.
Yeah, they have more than earned their keep here. They've also worked on 3D Zelda, with the Ocarina of Majora's Mask remakes, so I'd love to see their next entry be a lower scope, traditional 3D Zelda game. with some of that freedom baked in. I'm very curious to see what they would land on doing that.
Yeah.
But they're an excellent team, and Nintendo is sitting on a goose egg with them.
Absolutely.
Golden goose egg.
I believe their talent, I think they have talent reaching back to like Secret of Mana. So they have very talented people, long legacy people there too. I'd love them to be a Nintendo mainstay. But while we're talking about Grezzo a bit, clearly this game takes a lot from the Link's Awakening remake, which is interesting because like that's the second time a Zelda game has spawned off Link's Awakening. We had the Oracle's games, and now we've got Echoes of Wisdom branching off from the Link's Awakening remake. But with that also comes the tech issues. So Link's Awakening would often bounce between 60 FPS and 30 FPS. Echoes of Wisdom does the same thing, but it doesn't tend to get to 60. It kind of lingers around the 40 and 50 mark, which, when you first start, it is jarring. You are going to realize it's not as smooth as it could be. But I don't know if this is just my experience, but to be honest, that went to the back of my head while I was playing. I was just having too much fun to really be like, oh no, where are my frames?
Yeah, it kind of happened to me too. In that first hour or two, there was that little tinge of disappointment that it was not locked 60. And then I just kept playing, and the game makes up for it.
Yeah.
Like, what it's doing is far more important to me than how it performs in this case. Because you can tell that the gameplay innovations that they're coming up with come at the expense of the frame rate.
Yeah, it's a very busy game. It's a very busy game.
Yeah.
I wish they gave you the option to cap to 30, because that would solve most of these issues. And yeah, it is disappointing they couldn't hit 60, but it's also doing so much. And it's also a relatively slow-paced game. Like, you don't really need that many inputs in here. And the more input-heavy areas tend to be the dungeons, which pretty much are locked at 60.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you're in interiors, when you're in dungeons, the game basically runs perfectly. But when you're out exploring, especially in Hyrule Field, you'll see that frame rate
you'll feel it
dip down quite a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the end, it didn't really bother me because the game is just too interesting to put down.
Yeah, I think that's a good mark to say that we can talk about spoilers now, because we've talked about the general game, we talked about performance, we talked about what we like and don't like. Let's take the gloves off and just talk about whatever we want to talk about. So, Brandon, what do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about some of these echoes before we go too hard.
Okay.
There are a lot of them.
There's a lot.
And I was kind of curious what echoes you relied on, especially in combat. We haven't really talked about combat yet.
Yeah, I
but
guess not.
This is the most unique combat ever in a Zelda game.
Yeah.
Where directly engaging the enemy is very much not encouraged. Especially in my playthrough. I played on hero mode, and that mode will beat you down into dust if you're not careful.
I was saying to you that my experience was rather easygoing, and I think hero mode is what I need to try to overcome that. But in the early game, I focused a lot on the P-hat, the big spinny giant thing with blades that come out. That dealt with most of the enemies, especially when you fuse to it and move it around yourself. So it's not you're not like relying on the AI to target enemies. You just sort of move it on your own pace. That dealt with most encounters for like the first 5 hours.
See, I'm glad you bring this up, because doing that never even occurred to me.
Oh, really?
I never tried that.
Oh, whoa, okay.
So yeah, I relied more on the moblins, the ones that throw spears.
I didn't.
The Borblins that throw boomerangs.
That's interesting. They didn't really land with me, so I tried them out, and I felt like their spears were just missing a bit too much. So I stuck with a lot of like sword moblins.
But I did a similar thing to you, where I would grab them using bond.
That would have solved my issues that they're missing. Yeah.
So we approached our fights in a similar way, just with different creatures.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I also, once I got the water block, that kind of became a weapon in itself because you can just bind with an enemy and drown them in a water block.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, you can just pick them up and drown them.
I was, I think I was in the still world. There was one of the still worlds that had redeads in it, I think.
Yeah.
And my wife was watching me play, and I was just picking them up and throwing them off the edge. Yeah. That's how I killed a lot of enemies. And she looked over at me, and she's like, I think that's cheating. And I was like, no, this is the tool that the game has given me, and I'm going to use it.
Yeah. Oh, man. When in the Gerudo Mango mini game, I wasn't doing that right, I'm pretty sure, for the first few ones. So I was cutting those mangoes using the Whirlwind Echo, the Whirlwind enemy.
So did I.
That's what you were doing too? Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that your spin could cut the mangoes, and I didn't have the big rotating saw blade thing that you get from one of the interior caves at that point. So I was just spamming those little whirlwind guys everywhere, and it got me through like the first two ones, but that final difficulty, I don't think those guys quite cut it. But I came back later once I understood that the twirl cuts things, your sword cuts things, and also you have those big blades. But it was fun. It's just about barely getting by with those little guys.
It also gives you I think is it after the second one that you unlock the dancer outfit?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, and that gives you a bigger
that
twirl.
Actually, yeah, it gives you a bigger twirl. It makes you more mobile. So it's kind of neat that the game rewards you with the tool that will make the final one easier.
Yeah.
And also, speaking of the outfits, I remember in the lead up to release, they're like, the outfits don't do anything. They're just Zelda can wear different outfits.
Big old lies.
They lied.
Yeah.
They do have abilities.
One of them makes you talk to cats. Why do you neglect to mention it? Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, all these outfits are really, really cool. There aren't that many of them. It's not like Breath of the Wild where you can just sort of mix and match like top and trousers and everything. But they're really cool cosmetics and also give you little bonuses too. Also, I love that the Paper Mario spin is in here. I was spinning around so much. It kind of gives you that extra speed, kind of like rolling does. But I love little twirls. Little twirls are like a genre of game in its own.
I was a big fan of that too. They definitely gave that to Zelda so she would have a means to cut grass.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is perfect. But yeah, I really loved the extra outfits you could get. Now that we're talking about spoilers, you can't actually change your outfit until after the third dungeon in the game.
That's right, because you have the hood.
Yeah, for a while I was wondering, like, am I doing something wrong? Did I not find the way to do that? And then it started to kind of like trickle into me. I'm like, oh, she's wanted.
Yeah.
Like, she needs to stay hidden for this certain length of time. Until you save the King of Hyrule and he's like, oh, wait, you're not supposed to be a fugitive.
Yeah.
You're my daughter.
He said, yeah, his dark version says he's going to execute you. They put you in a dungeon, then you escape with the help of Tri. But yeah, let's talk about the story a little bit. So there's a lot of text in Echoes of Wisdom. The story isn't especially deep. It's mostly Zelda is wanted because there's shadow people who have replaced everybody and they've told her that she's bad. And then you go to dungeons, you free everybody from the rifts, and you make everything right by freeing the king. But Link is still lurking, and you've got to save him. That's the basic premise of the story. But there's a lot of cool dressing in between everything, and it's so nice having all these races in a top-down game. Like we've had in like the Oracle's games and Minish Cap a bit. We've seen some of these races, but they've never really been fleshed out like this in a more traditional top-down game. There's a lot of like 3D characters in here. Like there's Zoras in I think Oracle of Seasons, but they really aren't like the Zoras here in that regard. Mm-hmm. And then you get like Deku Scrubs, and it's just so nice seeing everything come together, both old and new in this top-down way. It's just a pleasure seeing just solving all their issues.
There's also an element there that I don't know if you picked up on, but was very special to me. was that the vast majority of designs for the other races as well as certain bosses, it was just pulled directly from Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask.
Absolutely.
The Deku Scrubs especially, those designs I don't think have been around since Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask.
No, Cadence of Hyrule had them, but like apart from that, there's nothing. They haven't really appeared again since then. I think Minish Cap had Deku Scrubs, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure to see those. You should have seen my face when I got to the boss of the Goron dungeon.
Oh, yes.
As soon as I entered the room and I saw those circular
you
lava
knew
pits,
what was
I
happening.
said, "Oh my god, it's Volvagian."
And it was, yeah. The bosses in this game are all really good, by the way. Like there isn't really...
They are.
There's not a single one where I went, oh, that kind of sucked. I saw one comment online saying, like, all the bosses are taking me like half an hour. I'm like, are they? Like, they're all really well paced. I don't think any of them really took longer than like 3 minutes. But the solutions are all really, really good. And that's the general thing about this game, is every echo is kind of also doubled as an item. So like you got like a mole echo, which is basically digging. And there's this one cool point where in the spot in A Link to the Past where you find the flute, if you dig there, you'll find like a crystal there. But it's in that exact spot. And then you've got things like the spider, which gives you a web to climb on. So not only are a lot of them for actual attacking, but many of them are just sort of disguised as items. And many bosses utilize all of those in really clever ways. Like they still manage to get that more traditional, like enter a dungeon, get a key item, and use it against the boss. Like that kind of loop is still kind of in there to an extent.
Yeah, even like the Faron Wetlands, in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, the equivalent to that location was also filled with a bunch of electric monsters. And that's true here as well, because it's very like water themed, and you'll find out that if you use a monster that has electricity, that there are effects in water, like the effect of the electricity is enhanced.
Yeah.
And then you end up using that against the boss Goma, which is super cool. Like, also, if you don't have electric keys during that fight, I could see it being quite challenging.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's super cool that element of find the item in the dungeon and use it to beat the dungeon is still kind of there, just not quite as in your face, and also in many cases not even required.
Yeah, you can absolutely do things in different ways. There's a bunch of ways that I cheese a lot of puzzles, like where I feel like there wasn't meant to be the solution, especially when it comes to heart pieces that I see in the world. The flying tile, which has been around since Link to the Past. Was that the debut?
I think so.
That little thing, you can just jump on it and zoom around. And I remember just jumping on that thing, zooming across the air, and just landing directly on a heart piece. Unfortunately, I don't think I have footage of that, but I remember just taking a leisurely ride and just somehow managing to fall directly onto a heart container. And that was so rad.
So you didn't know it was there?
I didn't know it was there. I was just jumping off a cliff, and it took me straight to it.
I love that. That's perfect. The flying tile ended up being probably my most used echo in the game, because it serves multiple purposes for me. Especially after you get the frog ring, which I never took off once I got.
It's amazing.
That is an essential accessory. Makes you jump much higher. But yeah, I would use the flying tile as a table, as a trampoline. Like, that was just my quick, I need a little bit of extra height echo, as well as I need to make some distance echo. It's a really nice, compact echo that does a lot of things really well.
Later in the game, you get a cloud echo, and I'm pretty sure that doesn't have any limit. Like, you can only spawn like 2 of them at a time, but they stay in the air. You can only stand on them for like a few seconds, but if you just spawn another one directly, I think you can just keep climbing. I climbed from the bottom of the snowy mountain all the way to the top without any trouble, just continuously spawning those clouds. It's very versatile, but it's a late game echo, but yeah, you can get around anywhere with that thing.
There's an early game echo, one that I saw Ash also used. I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, the one that jumped.
Platform an enemy.
Yeah, the one that just sort of like a thwomp almost. Yeah.
Yeah, that one is incredibly useful.
Yeah.
Like, I used it all over the game, especially in the early game, to climb over mountains and stuff. You can use it basically anywhere. And once you max out tries, I guess, all of her levels, you can spawn, I think, 3 at once. So you can start kind of stacking them together to make interesting things happen.
Yeah,
but
100%.
Yeah, I really love how many ways there are to climb.
Yes.
Like you meet the Crawlchula really early on in the game.
Yeah.
And at first, it made me kind of turn my head. And I was like, this seems like a really powerful echo to get this quickly. I'm like, I'm going to be climbing over stuff, and I feel like I shouldn't be able to do that yet. And I very quickly changed my tune on that. The game definitely was intending for you to just break your limits as soon as you could.
Yeah. I use the water block a lot. I saw a lot of people saying, like, the bed, you'll never retire the bed. Now, once I got that water block, I absolutely retired the bed in most circumstances.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, you just swim up anything so quickly. When it comes to combat, I relied a lot on just bokoblins a lot. And in the Kakariko Village testing minigame, where you go through those rounds of just defeating a bunch of enemies, there's one fairly close to the end. So at the point with the whiz robes, I remember spawning a bokoblin. Because the first time I tried like going into sword form and hitting them with arrows, and they kept killing me. And so what I did was I picked up the bokoblin and just sort of kept jumping. So it sort of became an aerial enemy. So every time I jumped, it would sometimes swing its sword at them and kill them in like 2 hits. And so I had a really powerful melee echo that's meant to be grounded, but because I picked up and I was jumping, it was able to reach all the whiz ropes.
I watched your clip of doing that.
Yeah.
It was after I had done it myself, and I was like, wow, that's so much easier than what I ended up doing. I managed to get like the fast time. Because, like, there's 2 time goals for each one. There's the base time where you get, like, the official reward, and then an even faster time that you can go for that gets you, like, a circle instead of a check mark. And then you get, like, an extra ingredient or whatever. I managed to pull that off. I don't even remember exactly what I did, but it was not as elegant as just picking up a moblin and letting them go to town.
Yeah. But yeah, there's so many echoes in here, and it's really interesting to see people playing in different ways. Like, a lot of people do gravitate towards the bed and the water block, but I'm very eager just to play the game again and try and do it in a different way, like trying to rely on different echoes. I want to start like a hero mode playthrough from scratch and just try and just use tools that I didn't really use last time. Because one more negative point we haven't really addressed is the echo menu. Kinda sucks. Being able to sort through them, like sorting by like most used, that's helpful, but it also discourages you from using ones that aren't your most used.
I ended up sorting by type just so that they were always in the same order, and I just generally knew where they were. But yeah, that is awful. Especially the further and further you get, it just gets worse, and they don't ever do anything to mitigate that.
No.
You have 1 echo slot on your face buttons to spawn. I think that was a mistake.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like, in Tears of the Kingdom, it already wasn't very good. Like, it's already kind of stretching its limits there. But now you've got, like 140 or 136 echoes, whatever it is. It's you can't...
127.
Okay, he's got the exact number, yeah.
I know exactly how many. Yeah.
You can go into your notebook and get a far more robust selection that's easier to navigate there. But it's just being able to hold the right button on the D-pad is so much quicker. And I don't understand why they couldn't have just given the quick select menu 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. It wouldn't change anything. It would just make it easier. Also,
why isn't there a set of favorites?
Yeah.
Like, I could just have a second row of favorites.
Yeah, that would have been so easy.
Interesting to note, too, like, it's mapped to the right D-pad, but it's also on L, which is way more convenient, if you ask me.
And there's nothing on down on the D-pad.
Yeah. I don't know why they don't tell you that you can just press L. I just kind of intuitively figured that out, like, really early on.
Yeah, I also intuitively figured out that the right analog stick moves the camera, which is rad. That's so nice for exploring, because you can just sort of like peek out into the distance and see if you miss like a heart piece or something.
There became a point in the game where I was using both sticks constantly.
Yeah, same.
To, like, always see ahead of me and around just in case I miss something. We didn't really talk about this as much, but you can, you climb over areas in Zelda that would typically be barriers, like trees, right? There are big areas just full of trees that you can't normally navigate, but you can in this game. And one of the things the game does to reward you is to put a stamp rally stamp in areas like that.
Oh, yeah.
So if there's an area that doesn't look like you should be able to go to, if you try going there, chances are you're going to find a stamp rally stamp. So the game is actively encouraging you to try and break series conventions and just go where you shouldn't.
Yeah, it's constantly rewarding you. It's so nice. One more non-spoilery thing we should talk about before really diving off the deep end is the music. I've seen mixed opinions. I saw our friend She said it's like the worst in the series, or the least interesting in the series. I don't think I'd go that far. I think the overworld theme is really nice. There's a few, like the Link's hometown, that theme is gorgeous, but you don't really hear it because you're never really there.
Yeah.
I like the Zora area. I think that music's really nice, but for the most part, yeah, it's largely not that memorable.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting situation because that's not usually the case for Legend of Zelda. People give Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom a lot of flack for the soundtracks, but
That's
I think
some
that's
of the
because
best.
it's got incredible music. You just forgot that it was in there.
yeah. That it's very contextual. That music. It's not like it's always been blasted to you in the overworld like most Zelda games do. Yeah.
Yeah, but the music here is a little bit more low key. I think even the instrumentation is very similar to Link's Awakening. They just kind of lifted that over. I almost wonder if some of this music was designed as chiptune music first.
When you're in the sword fighter form, if you let it go for a while, it does go chiptuney after a while. So I wonder if that's like a remnant or something. Yeah. Also, the sound design, and this was true Link's Awakening too, the sound design in general is really nice. Like you get like little footstep sounds depending on what you're walking on. Like it could be metallic, it could be hard, it could be grassy. They all sound different. The only thing that caught me off guard is, well, I think it's when you catch fire, or maybe when you shoot fire, you get this stock sound effect, which I recognize from Star Fox Adventures. I recognize from a bunch of other games, but that one's like, okay, I know that's a stock sound.
Yeah, it's so funny, especially like when you're like watching media that has very iconic sound effects that you find out are just stock sound effects that no one else uses. But yeah, I agree with you. Sound design is great. I do wish the music was a little bit more memorable, but for me, the standout track is the overworld theme after Dungeon 3.
It's so
I love
good.
what they do with the music there. There's a Zelda's Lullaby motif, and it's just fantastic. I got really, really jazzed when that version of the song started.
Yeah, and for as fairly standard as most of the songs are, I will give them credit for mostly being all completely original. We have when you're doing the horse race at the ranch, that gives you the Ocarina of Time racing music, which was nice to hear again. But for the most part, like the dungeon music, the boss music, the overworld music, the town music,
Goron City, Zora's Cove.
Yeah, it's all new stuff,
original.
And I will give it extreme credit for that because they could have just relied on remixes. And yeah, I will defend them. I think there's genuinely very high quality stuff in here, even if it's not stuff you're really going to listen to much outside of the game.
Yeah, and I think that's okay too, because this is the first game starring Zelda, so try something a little different, see what lands. And it wasn't a slam dunk on the music this time, but I think that's fine.
Yeah,
we'll just keep trying.
Yep, not bad, just not exceptional. But let's talk about the late game. So it was funny that they were pretty eager to show the Deku Tree in all their trailers and marketing. You don't see the Deku Tree. You don't see the Deku Tree until the end of the game. It's like that's the climax area.
Yes, I I was flabbergasted. I got in there. They're like, you need to go to the Eternal Forest, and I'm like, I'm out of dungeons. Is this really the last location?
Yeah, it's like, baby,
There
was. Yeah, I was like, baby, I've been to the Eternal Forest like 5 times now. You mean I'm meant to go here now? And yeah, you go through there and you complete its trials, which is just putting a bunch of orbs on some pedestals. One of those eluded me, though. There's the one with the plant creature on. I didn't realize you meant to kill it to reveal a pedestal.
It's hidden really well.
Yeah. But yeah, you do that, and the Deku Tree is revealed to you, and he just kind of goes, "Oh, Zelda, I thought I just saw you," but it was the villain Null. And it's interesting too, because throughout the entire game, you're led to believe that Ganon is the villain, because you fight him at the start, and you think that Ganon creates the voids, but no, Null has been lurking under Hyrule since the very beginning. The goddess has only created Hyrule to contain Null.
I really like how I mentioned the Ocarina of Time designs earlier, and this is why. This is the core reason I wanted to bring it up, because they tie it directly into the lore established in that game, that the 3 goddesses created the world, but now we know why they did.
Yeah, it was just to keep this guy at bay. And it works, because like otherwise Null would be a really uninteresting little blob guy. You know, there's not much to him. But now we know that he is this imposing threat. That's the reason all of Zelda even exists. And I really like the final boss. I think they pull things off really well. They take your sword away from you. They make you give it to Link. And it kind of gives you this reverse Wind Waker final battle. Because in Wind Waker, you know, you're playing as Link and Zelda's shooting the arrow to freeze Ganondorf. This time, Link's just sort of fighting alongside you as if you were an Echo. But you're then using your own echoes yourself. But it gives this flipped perspective. And the music in that area is bonkers.
Fantastic.
It's so good. I was on the sofa finishing this while my family was just doing other things. And Roxy said, like, I keep hearing wolves howling from your Switch, but also the music is like the most hardcore thing I've ever heard in my life. So I was just summoning the wolf echoes repeatedly. So you've got this superimposing music, and all you hear is, oh, every now and then.
I love that the Wolfos made it into the game. Once again, another Ocarina of Time design.
Yeah, absolutely.
I loved the final boss fight. It felt appropriately long. Even using my strongest echoes, like, you really had to work for it. I even used my automatons, which are really strong, and I was just not getting anywhere. That fight takes some time.
And that's on hero mode, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't like that much of a challenge on regular mode. Like it definitely pushes you a bit. But I had a pretty easygoing time with it. But the flow of it was really good. And I loved, one thing I really loved is before the final boss in many games, it's easy to do a gauntlet of other bosses. This one doesn't do that, but instead kind of gives you like little echoes of those bosses. So sometimes it will throw you moves from bosses throughout the game. Like, it will take you back to the water boss, where it summons those tornadoes, or takes you back to Ganondorf, or Ganon even, who's just sort of echoing himself into like 4 different ones that will try and thrust his spear at you. I love that it incorporates everything while still encompassing it in one big boss fight. That was really well done.
Yeah, it felt like the culmination of the game. I also really agree with the choice to take the sword away from you.
Yeah.
Because finally, the game fully commits to itself and says, you need to fight this monster using the tools we gave you and not rely on the old methods. Sure, you have Link there also dealing damage alongside you, and the weapons he has are actually the level of upgrade that you got yourself.
Right.
So if you didn't upgrade them, they're actually weaker.
That's true, yeah. In fact, throughout the game, I didn't rely on the sword very much at all. I used it in boss battles when like the boss was collapsed and it was my time to whack at them. But I was mostly just relying on echoes throughout the majority of it.
For me, it ended up being a little different, especially towards the last quarter of the game. I'd say, because like I said previously, just combat in general was pretty tough for me.
Yeah, I bet.
The in hero mode, enemies deal twice the damage, and this game takes some notes from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, where enemies can hit really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And when you double the already really hard, it gets really hard. I even had some regular monsters that could one-shot me.
Oh, wow.
My full health bar in one hit. It provided a pretty interesting, unique challenge. But yeah, I ended up needing the sword mode just to survive sometimes.
Gotta pack those smoothies.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you had this issue too. In the final dungeon, there's parts where you've got to cooperate with Link and solve some puzzles before the final fight. And at one point, there's like a gate between you and Link, and you've got to hold down the Y button to sort of shoot an echo across the rooms to make a staircase for him. And the first thing I thought to do was, let's just build him a tower of water to climb up. And I built that, and he just stared at it. He's like, I'm not climbing that water, Zelda. Build me an actual tower. And I just kept spawning those waterfalls, and he just wouldn't climb them.
This is interesting. I did not solve it that way. You know what I did?
I mean, I couldn't, so he wouldn't climb it, but what did you do?
I just grabbed him and jumped.
What?
Yeah, you can grab him yourself. And just
is that what you're meant to do? Okay, so what? That makes so much more sense. So what I ended up doing was I'd hold the Y button to sort of shoot an echo across the room, and I'd build a staircase of like boxes because he can jump as high as a box, where Zelda can't without that badge on. So I would like build a staircase that was at the front to 1 high, then 2 high, then 3 high. And I would have to stack them by moving them closer to me to actually get them in a row. So obviously that's probably not the way you do it, but that is how I ended up doing that bit there.
That's so funny. Yeah, to me, right away, it hit me in the head. I was like, oh, I need to grab him and just jump up myself.
Yeah, that did not reveal itself to me.
It's funny, too, because there's a funny little animation that plays when you grab Link. Like, he starts struggling. He's like, put me down.
And that makes sense, too, because he starts on a platform that's higher than the floor. So clearly, yeah, that makes sense. I feel so dumb. But yeah, it worked. It worked.
I think what you did is more interesting. But yeah, I really enjoyed that brief dungeon, just working together with Link, basically having to solve puzzles for him because he just doesn't contribute. He just kind of stands there waiting for you to do stuff.
He just whacks stuff. That's his thing.
But going back to the story really quick. I really appreciated having the Triforce back in a Zelda game.
It's been a while. I mean, and Breath of the Wild has the Triforce. Like when Zelda seals Ganon, she has it on her hand. When she saves Link from the Guardians, it's on her hand. But it's not a pivotal part of the story.
Also, the Triforce feels like a lost lore in that game, and it is in this one too, actually.
Yeah.
Because they refer to it as the Prime Energy, and as soon as they said Prime Energy, I was like, okay, this is the Triforce.
Yeah,
we're going in deep. And I was really happy to see that, because I find that Zelda's lore is diverging. You know, with Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, the whole idea of the well, I won't get too deep into that, but like the Zonai threw a wrench in how I perceive the world.
Yes.
But they seem to go back the other direction with this game.
Yeah.
Despite being like a smaller scope Zelda, they still made it a point to have something that furthers the series lore, like Null, and the fact that he was there before Hyrule existed, and Hyrule only existed to seal him away. I thought that was neat.
Yeah. And the Triforce pretty much always involves Link, Zelda, and Ganon. Or Demise in some way. But to have Null go for it is also a big twist on it. And there's a really good moment right before you get into that final dungeon where Null gets the Triforce, and it feels like they're gonna get all the pieces. But then one flies to Zelda, and then one flies within the rift towards Link, which is a really cool moment as well. But yeah, that's just a really cool, like, okay, it ups the stakes and makes Null more of an impact there. And then in the final boss, you like actively rip the Triforce out of Null using the bind ability, which is such a cool interactive way to end that battle. It's so good.
I don't know what you were thinking, but they were taking a long time to reveal Null's true form. They were like really hamming it up. And I was like really racking my brain. I was like, before this game came out, people were like, you're going to use your echoes and you're going to make Link an echo and you're going to spawn him yourself. And I'm like, is he going to be Vati? Is this going to be a Four Swords moment? But no, they went a safer option, I think, but still a cool one. Because he kind of absorbs the what I affectionately call the Tri-Force.
Oh, yeah.
And he takes their shape, and he's kind of this creepy eldritch horror that you fight in the end.
I thought it was a great battle. I thought it was a really good design. Null isn't like the strongest, like in terms of like presence. It's not like the strongest Zelda villain. I wouldn't really rank them higher than like Vati, but I think the way that it works within the story, the self-contained story, is really good. I'm not saying I want Null to return. Null's pretty much dead anyway, but I just loved what they did here, though.
I mean, there's ways they could play with that in the future, because now we know that Null is technically there in any Zelda game.
That's true. Just under the grass.
He's just hiding.
Just keep digging. Get that shovel. Keep digging. You're gonna find Null.
So yeah, I appreciate the attempts to expand lore. I'm glad that they seem committed to at least making that interesting for like hardcore Zelda fans. But there are more bosses.
Yes.
John,
yes.
than just the ones that the game throws at you.
I was really surprised. I was expecting just like more powerful version of existing ones, and it goes beyond that.
What an absolute pleasure to go into the Eastern Palace from Link to the Past.
Yes.
And find out there's just a dude in there.
Yeah, just a guy.
This cloud man that you have to beat up.
Yeah.
You fight him in 2D?
Yeah. It's really similar. The 3D version is really similar to one from Oracle of Seasons, I want to say. It might even be identical. But there was one boss in there where you would you defeat them by pushing little bricks around and making them merge together. I don't know if it was I don't know if it was an intentional callback, but it was almost the same mechanically, and it was really cool to see that come back.
The Oracle games are my only blind spot, so I was wondering if maybe he came from them. But yeah, that's really cool. And then you have to fight him a second time. And you're right, you do fight him once in 3D and then once in 2D. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But he's not the only one. Like,
No.
Every major area except Hebra Mountain has a secret extra boss. And, like, a little mini dungeon to go along with it. My favorite, by far, just because of the thematics of the whole thing, is the pirate ship.
Yes.
Because the boss waiting on the inside was such a pleasant surprise. Just as pleasant as Volvagia. It's the great Jabu Jabu boss from Ocarina of Time,
so
but
cool.
in 2D.
It's really, really cool. And you're right, like there is so much Ocarina of Time in here. Clearly the developers love that game. And Grezzo, if anybody have earned the right to that cast of characters from doing Ocarina and Majora in 3D remakes. And it's also cool the director of this game is a woman, like the first female director of Zelda. And what better game to lead than the first Zelda game? But I want her on board for far more games. Like clearly she understands what makes not only what makes classic Zelda work, but what makes Breath of the Wild work, and just merging them together in an incredible way. There's so little like actual things I don't like about this game. I didn't love some of the story roadblocks, even if they were pretty minor. The performance stuff, yeah, that's an issue. Otherwise, I just had a great time, a brilliant time with this game.
I really only have one major criticism, and I say major, but it's really not a huge deal. For me, Zelda dungeons are twofold.
Okay.
They are great puzzle design, and they are thematically great design. And I think it falls short on that second one for me.
Sure.
The dungeons are very, very classic Zelda design, and they don't leave much room for just interesting locales.
The Hyrule
One thing
Castle
I
one
loved.
was pretty cool, I'd say. And there was
Oh yeah,
there was one dungeon where you go in and out of the void to get different areas, and I thought that was a cool one because like not everything's contained in the same space, and so you kind of go through different entrances. That was a nice dungeon. But yeah, I fully agree. Like there's not like a big thematic like this takes place in a grassy, desolate forest like that. It's not really like that.
yeah, and that's something I think even Link to the Past does really well. So it's like it's not necessarily the scope holding it back. They put their efforts into the dungeon design and the puzzle design, and I would take that 9 times out of 10 over thematic design. I just really appreciated going into Tears of the Kingdom and them kind of dialing back the other way, letting the thematic stand out a bit more, because that's what makes me remember a dungeon is what it looks like. So there was a little bit of a disappointment there, but like I said, not a huge deal. Going through the dungeons was still a blast. Being able to solve puzzles, opening a chest, and finding a small key. Let me tell you, the feeling of finding a small key just washed over me. And I'm like, we're back, baby.
Yeah. So I guess I have like one final question, really. Where does this land for you in terms of 2D Zelda rankings?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, it's complicated. There's not really a right answer, nor is there there's really just an easy answer, because I think there's a lot of different reasons for why these are all good games, and this one, for some reasons, is better than others. Other reasons isn't. But what does your gut say right now, though?
I think my gut would probably put this right underneath Link to the Past. I think if the world had even strayed itself more from traditional 2D Zelda design, I think I'd rank it higher than Link to the Past, which would then put it, I think, right at the top of the list. Link to the Past and Link Between Worlds I could go back and forth with on any day. So for all intents and purposes, that's the same entry for me.
Yeah.
But it's right near the top. It's just such a freeing experience. I loved it from start to finish, and just like you, I'm really excited about playing it again in the future and just having a completely different experience than I did the first time. Just by virtue of trying out different echoes.
It's interesting that they built this on top of Link's Awakening, because in comparison, that's a very rigid game. And I mean,
Yeah.
I love Link's Awakening, but it's very much built around roadblocks. You can't get around this area unless you have this item. You can't jump on trees, obviously. But it's a game that slowly unravels its web, whereas this game just spreads the web everywhere. They can go wherever you want. They're very different thematically. For me personally, I'm struggling to know exactly where I rank this. I think letting time do its thing and fully reflecting will probably change the opinion greatly. But right now, I think it's just the most fun to explore Zelda game. Maybe out of all of them. I think Tears of the Kingdom Breath of the Wild gave you a different feeling in that regard, but this one just constantly, it doesn't let up. It's just constantly fun to explore and get collectibles. In terms of like the overall, like the main quest and everything, I don't know if it exceeds A Link to the Past. I think A Link to the Past was very good at just letting you get to it. It just sort of let you get to the dungeons when you wanted to. There wasn't as much downtime. Yeah. And this one, especially at the beginning, it's not all killer. There's points where it definitely feels like they're speaking too much. They're not letting you do your thing directly. It gets better with it, but A Link to the Past, I think, has a better pacing in that respect. But I think I might be with you. I think it's up there with A Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds.
Yeah, it's an excellent game. It is the direction I'd like for them to continue to explore with 2D Zelda. I want to see this level of freedom in a game that does not marry itself so hardcore to what 2D Zelda was before. Like, this is still very much the kind of world they would have designed for a game like Link to the Past, right? You know, they haven't deviated much from that. And I'd like to see them both deviate from traditional 2D Zelda world design and make the world free. I think that would result in a very fresh experience. I don't know how you do that. This is just what I'm interested in seeing them try. Reinvent the wheel. I think it's time.
Yeah.
I want to see what happens.
And there were some really good side quests in here too. I feel like a lot of the first 2 dungeon stuff probably could have been side quests, but there were there were moments like there's moments in this game, specifically like those bosses we mentioned. They're technically side quests, but there's lots of areas where it's not just show me this echo, fetch me this thing. There's a lot of far more involved quests, probably more than most other Zelda games, and it just kept feeling consistently fun, and a lot of the characters just they grounded themselves in a way that I don't think we really see from that many Zelda games. It's not like I'm going to be able to tell you all the names of these characters or anything, but I feel like just the vibes of all these areas feels really fleshed out. Other than Hebra Mountain, which was kind of just a one and done thing, really. But
Hebra Mountain existed to give you the Yetis back from Twilight Princess.
Yeah.
For one game.
Were the Yetis technically in Phantom Hourglass as well?
Oh, it's been so long since I've played Phantom Hourglass that I don't remember them.
Yeah, but either way, it's been a long time since the Yetis. But yeah, I think we can just talk about this game forever, really. But I can't wait to see speedruns. I'm already seeing a bunch of techniques from Japanese users specifically. One person managed to put a bird down, hold on to the bird, put down that machine that gives you a gust of wind, and then they merged themselves with that gust of wind, and it just pushed them constantly forwards on the bird, giving them constant air. So that's one technique you can do. I saw another user put a bed down and then put the twirly tornado guys underneath it, and it launched them in the air. So there's clearly a bunch of fun techniques out there.
I saw that. I saw both of those, but the bed one specifically, it never even occurred to me that the tornado could affect solid objects like that.
Yeah.
I thought it only affaffected enemies.
I thought it would just break the bed.
So when I saw that, my mind just expanded.
Replay is going to be so fun, and I can't wait to see how people how they managed to skip through huge chunks of the game. But yeah, what a very special one. And this is we're pretty much, this is the last year of the Switch. It's going to continue on a bit next year too, and probably after the successor comes out. But comparatively to what 3DS was getting at this point in its life, it is a total 180. 3DS was digging for anything. Like Triforce Heroes, I thought was a good game, and it kind of came out around the same time. But that was a very different use of Link Between Worlds assets. That made a cheaper game, a smaller game. This is one of the biggest 2D Zeldas ever, and it's
quite possibly the biggest 2D Zelda.
It probably is the biggest. And interestingly, for how quickly you can move around through it, it's still probably the longest 2D Zelda. Most of them are around 15-20 hours max. This hits a similar length, but you're doing so much more in that time span as well. So it may be the biggest and the longest, while also being the quickest.
Yeah, it's a fun way to put it. I was surprised at the runtime. The game just kept going, and it jazzed me up. I was like, great, I didn't want it to end yet.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we've probably said all we can say for now, but I'm sure we'll talk about this game more, maybe in the Game of the Year Awards. We'll see what people think. But for now, Echoes of Wisdom is a pretty good game.
I loved it.